All right, I think I'll get started. There's seems to be a number of people in the chat. All right, welcome everyone. Tonight we'll be talking about asymmetric cryptography in preparation for Friday's talk, which will delve further into the weeds on asymmetric crypto. Tonight will be kind of an introduction to the concepts behind asymmetric crypto, as well as the math behind some more basic stuff, like the Diffie Hellman key exchange. So with that out of the way, let's just get started. All right, so quick overview. So on Friday, we talked about symmetric crypto systems, and when you're using a symmetric key crypto system, both the sender and recipient use a single key for both encryption and decryption, and that key somehow has to be pre-shared. So if the sender and receiver are very far apart, it's kind of hard to share that key over the internet without fear of it being tracked or somehow being captured by an evil third party. And especially if the two parties are very far apart, then they can't meet in person. So how do we approach this problem of key exchange? Well, besides asymmetric cryptography being able to just do encryption and decryption, it can also give rise to key exchange algorithms where you can generate a shared symmetric key by using an asymmetric crypto system as a scheme for that generation. So asymmetric crypto, as opposed to having a single shared key among both parties, in asymmetric crypto both parties generate a pair of keys. So both parties will generate a public key and a private key that will be used in communications. So for example, with encryption, let's say Alice wants to send a message to Bob. Now, Bob and Alice will have both generated a public and private key, and to send a message to Bob, Alice will use his public key to encrypt a message into a ciphertext. And then she will send that off to Bob. And once Bob receives that ciphertext, he will decrypt it using his private key. And now only Bob knows his private key, but he can give out his public key to anyone he likes so that anyone can send a message to him that only he can read. So if Bob wants to respond back to Alice, then he has to use her public key to encrypt a new message, and Alice will then decrypt that message with her private key. So kind of in parallel to encryption, asymmetric crypto also allows for the signing of messages. So if we consider encryption to be a function of two inputs, a message and a public key, then we can decrypt that result with the private key or secret key to get the original message back. But you can actually swap the private and secret key in this computation. So you can encrypt something with a secret key and decrypt it with a public key. That means that if you encrypt a message with your own private key, then anybody that has your public key will be able to decrypt that message. So this is called digital signatures, or this type of scheme is called a digital signature. And it's a way of verifying the source of some message or data. So if you want to, for example, verify that a piece of software really comes from you, then if you give out your public key beforehand, you can encrypt that piece of software with your private key, and then anyone who has your public key will decrypt that piece of software, and they'll know that it came from you, because the decryption was successful. Now, encrypting a whole large chunk of data is kind of slow. So what actually gets done in the real world usually is, instead of signing the entire data block that you're sending to somebody, you will instead calculate a hash on that data and sign the hash. So you'll encrypt the hash with your private key, and so when the recipient receives whatever you sent them, they'll take your public key, decrypt the hash, and then calculate a hash on the actual data that got sent along with the hash and compare the two. And if they match, then they know that, first off, the data hasn't been altered in any way, and also they'll know that the data actually came from you. So before we get into the main topic for today, which is the Diffie-Hellman key exchange, I just wanted to kind of do a brief, basic overview of modular arithmetic. It was covered a little bit last week on Monday when I did the classic crypto talk, but basically when you modulus something by another number, you're basically taking the remainder of a division. So if you modulus 10 by 3, what you're doing is you're taking 10 and dividing it by 3 and outputting the remainder. So 3 times 3 plus 1 is 10, so the remainder of 10 divided by 3 is 1. A property of modular arithmetic is that it limits your output to a certain range. So that means that if you keep increasing the number that you modulus by, or the number that is being modulused, then eventually the result will wrap around back to 0. And that wrapping around occurs when the number that's being modulused becomes divisible by the modulus. So for example, if I have a number that's divisible by 7 and I mod it by 7, then the division there has a remainder of 0 because the larger number is cleanly divisible by 7. And if I increase it by 1, then I'll have a mod of 1, and so on. So yeah. Another concept in modular arithmetic is that of the multiplicative inverse. So modular arithmetic only deals with integers. There's no such thing as fractions in modular arithmetic. So if we want to do a division modulo some number, we have a different way of thinking about it. So if you just think of the rational numbers, if you have the number 2, the inverse of 2 in the rationals is a half, because the product of 2 and a half is 1. In a similar way, we can define what an inverse means in modular arithmetic. If we have a number a, then the inverse of that number, b modulo n, is an integer such that a times b is 1 mod n. And this only happens if a and n are relatively prime, but I'll get into that in just a sec. So there's also quite a few convenient rules to modular arithmetic that can make it a lot easier to do computation. So modular arithmetic is, I think, associative is what this is here, or maybe I don't remember. But basically, you can expand the modulus out to each operand when you're doing arithmetic modulo sum n. So a plus b mod n, if you have that, you can expand it out and take a mod n and b mod n and then add them together and take the result mod n. And sometimes this can be faster, especially if a and b are quite large. And actually, it's more useful if you're doing exponentiation. So you see on this line, if you take a to the power b mod n, this is called modular exponentiation, then you can take each operand modulo n, and the resulting computation will be much easier. So like I said earlier, a modular inverse for a number modulo some m exists if and only if a and m are relatively prime. Otherwise, there actually is no such number. So we demark the number b as a to the power -1, or just a inverse, and vice versa. A is equivalent to b inverse. So with that, let's get into the main topic for today, which is the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. And this is a scheme that can be used for generating a shared secret key among two people in such a way that a person watching the network can't reasonably recover the key in any reasonable amount of time. So let's say we have sender and recipient, or whatever, two people, Alice and Bob. What Alice and Bob do is publicly agree on two numbers, G, which is a generator, and P is a prime modulus. So both of these are numbers, and G is inherently relatively prime to P because P is prime itself. So then Alice and Bob both pick private numbers, little a and little b, in the range from 1 to p, inclusive, or not including p. So from 1 up to p minus 1. And then each of them computes the result g to the power a mod p. So Alice has capital A and Bob has capital B, and then they both send these to each other. Now, if someone is watching the traffic on the network here, then they won't actually be able to figure out what little a and little b is from just looking at capital A and capital B. This is because if little a is quite large, if the number g to the power a is larger than p, which most likely it will be, then like I mentioned earlier, g to the power a, that result will then wrap around once or twice, multiple times through this circle 0 to p. So doing this operation in reverse is a lot harder than doing it in the forward direction. So once Alice and Bob have exchanged their computed values, they then take the result that they received from the other person and again raise it to the power of their private number. So Alice will take B, which she received from Bob, and raise it to the power A mod P. And this has the result of, because B is equivalent to G to the power B mod P, raising G to the power B to the power A, due to the basic rules of arithmetic, will give her the value of G to the power of A times B mod P. And if Bob does the same thing with the value he receives from Alice, then he will get the same result. So in this way, Alice and Bob have reached an agreed upon shared constant value without actually having sent that value over the wire. And then they can both use this value to encrypt any symmetric crypto communications between them in the future. So why is this secure? Well, like I mentioned, doing this, given the value sent over the wire, it's very hard to find the private exponent that was used. This is called the discrete log problem. So we have a value a, which is equal to g to the power x mod p, where p is prime. And if we're given a, g, and p, finding x is believed to be NP complete, although this hasn't actually been proven, but we no polynomial time algorithm has been found to date that actually results in x in polynomial time. So if Eve is watching the network, she will end up receiving both of the values that are sent over the wire, but she won't actually be able to gain any information from them. So despite this, if you just try and implement Diffie-Hellman in a vanilla way, then it's actually vulnerable to being man-in-the-middled. So if Carol somehow finds a way to take over the network that Alice and Bob are communicating on, and finds a way to insert herself in the middle of that communication, then what she can do is, she can generate her own private exponent, C, and say Alice and Bob, generate their private exponents. And all parties then compute their generated value with g, so they take g to the power of their private exponent mod p. And so Alice tries to send off her result to Bob, but Carol intercepts it and replies with her own calculated value. So to Alice, it seems like Bob has replied with a value, but in reality it's Carol that's replying. And then Carol will send off her value to Bob. So Bob will receive that value thinking it's coming from Alice and send off his calculated value to Alice, but that value will be intercepted by by Carol. So then Alice will go through calculating the shared secret, which she thinks is being shared with Bob, but in reality is being shared with Carol, because Carol can then take the A value that she received, take it to the power of her private exponent, and she'll get to the same value that Alice did by taking the value she received from Carol and raising it to her private exponent. And then the same thing will happen with Bob. So Carol and Bob will both arrive at the same result. And at this point, the scheme is completely broken, because if Alice uses K1 to encrypt some message and send it off to Bob, then Carol can very easily decrypt it, read it and modify it if she wants, and re-encrypt it with K2 and send it off to Bob, who will then decrypt it with K2 and read whatever message that Carol had sent. So this can pretty easily be solved by using some sort of identity check, or maybe digital signatures on the actual values that you send out. But yeah, that's basically an overview of Diffie-Hellman. So coming up on Friday, we will be looking at RSA, which is kind of the classic asymmetric crypto system that everybody knows. And like Diffie-Hellman, RSA relies on the hardness of the discrete log problem, as well as that of prime factorization. And what's funny is both of these problems are not actually confirmed. They haven't been proven to be NP complete. And actually, in the case of prime factorization, if you have a powerful enough quantum computer, then there actually is an algorithm that can factor a number into its prime factors in polynomial time. However, that type of computer is a long way off, so don't go freaking out saying that RSA is dead just yet. But RSA is really interesting, or I should say it's quite fun, because it's very easy to mess up. There's quite a lot of attacks, especially on textbook RSA. If you just implement RSA as is, without any sort of modifications, then you can mess it up really easily. So as a result of this, you see this a lot in CTFs. There's usually a few challenges where someone has implemented RSA badly, and that implementation is vulnerable to some sort of attack. So it's pretty essential to know if you're doing crypto in CTFs. And also on Friday, if there is time, then maybe we'll cover elliptic curve cryptography. And this is a scheme that's more abstract than RSA. It's a bit harder to wrap your mind around. It's based on elliptic curves, as the name implies. And the hard problem that this one relies on is known as the elliptic curve discrete log. So there's a version of the discrete log problem for elliptic curves that's also, I think, not confirmed to be NP complete, but is believed to be, because no algorithm has been found that can solve it in polynomial time to date. So yeah, that pretty much concludes today's talk. I know it's a bit of a shorter one, but the more important stuff, or the more interesting stuff, will be coming on Friday, so you have that to look forward to. Alright, well, thank you for coming, everybody, and I guess see you all on Friday.